So, folks, there is a holiday that is acknowledged by the U.S. government called Columbus Day, and it sucks. It basically exists to celebrate a man who single-handedly raped, genocided, tortured, basically any kind of heinous crime or act you can imagine. He did it, or he allowed his men to do. He was truly awful, and for some reason in America, we decided we were going to celebrate him broadly as a society. And luckily, that is now finally starting to be rectified, and we're backpedaling on that. You know, we've turned the page of history on it to an extent, and now we're calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're using it to celebrate, the people of America. Um, who were here before the colonization happened. And I think that's a step in the right direction, at the very least. And conservatives always get really weird about this particular day because to them, attacking the concept of Columbus is sacrilege. They envision him as essentially a deified or sanctified figure who represents like the American religion, if in our patriotic context. And any attack on Columbus is an attack on the wider activities of America, which it is, because the wider activities of America as a state have historically been really bad, generally speaking. There are some exceptions, but generally, you know, we do things like, I don't know, do violent coups to take over a country's banana production capacity. And then we come up with the term banana republic for it, and that term gets so widely accepted that a niche clothing store opens that sells safari clothing, and they decide to call themselves Banana Republic, and then somehow transition into like a upper middle class like office wear company. We live in a weird country, is what I'm trying to say. Um so anyway, of course,
Today is Columbus.
like clockwork, Ben Shapiro did a segment on Columbus Day, and specifically, he's very, very upset because apparently Kamala Harris wants to ban Columbus Day. And you know what? We I don't think we need to ban it. We could just like stop recognizing it as a holiday. We could do that. I don't think we need to have like police patrolling for any errant Columbus Day celebrations. Like I don't think anyone is gonna be have a cop pounding on their door to get them to, you know, burn their Columbus Day. I don't even know Columbus Day tree. What are the associated traditions with it anyway? What makes it so special to these men? I don't understand. But let's hear what Ben Shapiro has to say about how upset he is about the idea of Columbus Day maybe not being celebrated by the federal government anymore.
Today is Columbus Day. It is a celebration of Christopher Columbus, who essentially opened the American.
Well, that's not the screen that has information on it. That guy that doesn't help you at all. That also doesn't help you at all. God damn it. Also not helpful. There we go. That's marginally more helpful. Here we go.
Americas to European exploration, which, by the way, was a net positive for planet Earth. Okay? Without a doubt. Of course.
Was it? Because a lot of people attribute the colonization, like the activities and like mass devastation wreaked there as like measurable on like a environmental scale, like a lot of researchers attribute the Little Ice Age to mass deforestation as a result of the depopulation of South America and Latin America. I don't know, like we crushed, so many civilizations were crushed and so many people died. You know, surely one of them may have been the next Aristotle or Socrates or Einstein or something along those lines, because like millions of people died.
course, terrible things happen in the course of any conquest. Terrible things happen in the course of any population movement.
Yeah. And in this case, how many people died? Here, let me just Google how many people died after Columbus. With the arrival of the first European settlers, waves of new diseases, along with the warfare, slavery, and other brutality, 56 million people died, Ben, or around 90% of the indigenous population, Ben. Some bad things happened. 56 million people died, Ben. Like, yeah, some bad things happened. Some bad things.
Also, very good thing that North America and South America had Western influence in them.
Was it good enough to kill 56 million people? Ben, what was it good enough? Was it a good reason to kill 56 million people? Now, one of the things that I find so fascinating is that Ben Shapiro will attribute so much weight to, like, oh, well, you know, Western civilization was here, and so, you know, the white man lifted up the poor primitives. It is one of the oldest tropes. One of the oldest, like, racist tropes, mind you, in, like, European culture. Like, oh, you know, we're not going over there to do a colonialism. We're going over there to uplift the native peoples. We're going over there to teach them English and, you know, give them better housing and cleaner water and sanitation. We're going over there to better their lives. And then you actually, like, look over at what they're doing in, you know, Latin or South America or, you know, the entire continent of Africa. And you're like, but wait, you're not actually bettering their lives. Like, you're chopping off their hands and forcing them to work on slave plantations. Like, that's what you're doing. And essentially, Ben Shapiro here is taking the position of those same, like, hand-wringing folks who wanted to feel a little bit better about the atrocities that their societies were committing. You know, like, that's effectively the position he's taking.
And the tribes that predated them on the continent were, in general, quite barbaric.
Hey, Ben. I studied medieval European history here. You might not know this, but Europeans were incredibly barbaric. They did this whole thing called the Spanish Inquisition, where they invented all kinds of crazy and insane torture devices. Like a metal lady that they'd put you into that would impale you with spikes, and then they'd just leave you to bleed to death. You know? Stuff like that. You know, barbaric thing. And largely, Europeans kept fighting with each other for centuries. Germany was famously just a collection of squabbling kingdoms going back and forth, killing each other based on their religious affiliations of Catholic or Protestant for centuries. And hey, you know what? I seem to recall something about England fighting 100 years-long war. Famously a war that involved a lot of people dying and mass starvation. Like, Ben, Europeans were very barbaric. They just had big fancy castles. To say that they were more civilized and peaceful is honestly a complete misreading of history. You can only think that if you've never cracked open a history text.
Many of them were engaged in precisely the same kinds of tribal warfare that people all over the planet are engaged in. This sort of
Yeah. Including the people in Europe that you're setting up as being like these enlightening figures that were worth like 56 million deaths. It was worth killing 90% of the indigenous population to introduce them to such enlightened Westerners.
sort of attempt to whitewash everybody who's living on these relatively unpopulated continents. I say relatively because, of course, there was a population, but it was certainly not all that large. If you look at person per space in the United States, for example, on the north.
If you look at person per space, that is one of the weirdest ways of measuring that, Ben. Oh, it's not that populated if you measure people by space. Well, yeah, Ben. A lot of places aren't that populated if you if you use that same metric. In fact. Like, Ben. What is wrong with you? I just it really does it really does baffle me. You know, pre-contact estimate of indigenous peoples in America. Yeah, not that many people. It could be difficult to determine exactly how many natives lived in North America before Columbus. Estimates range from 3.8 million to 7 million, to a high of 18 million, and also, second. I got some pizza. What happened? Weirdly enough, the pizza delivery guy came into my apartment building and then knocked on my apartment door. So that is what happened. I gave explicit instructions to just leave it in the lobby, so that was really weird. I don't like people knocking on my door in my apartment. So, anyway. There were a lot of people in the Americas prior to contact. One of them being one of the centers of this being a place called Cahokia, which at its peak in around 1100 CE had anywhere from 10 to 20,000 people. Which, to give you a measurement of equivalence at that time, London was not that large. So, Cahokia and like the civilizations built up in the United States, in what became the United States, in Latin America, South America, these were huge. These were mind-bogglingly large civilizations. And Ben Shapiro just writes it off like, oh, it's actually good that they're all dead. It's really deeply frustrating, but also not at all surprising given his ideological outlook and the value he places on people who are ideologically different from him, we'll say.
North American continent is a fairly sparsely populated continent, but the kind of attempt to paint the European West as uniquely evil, Kamala Harris does that kind of stuff. She has said she wants to get rid of Columbus Day in favor of Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, listen, that is an amazing statement. It really is. Are we truly to believe that Kamala Harris, the greatest beneficiary in American life of the existence of European colonization, truly, I mean, she's the vice president of the United States, which began as a European colony.
Yeah, and then, hey, Ben, what happened after that? What happened? How did I forget? I'm a little rusty on my history. How did the European countries treat America again? Was it good? Did our founders that came from England, did they treat America very well? Is that the history? And we're still part of England to this day? Oh, wait, no, it's not. That's not how that worked at all. Oh, wow. Strange. Did we fight a whole war to not be, associated with them? That's crazy.
Up there saying that we shouldn't celebrate Christopher Columbus. That it's like the beneficiary of a penicillin vaccine saying that we should not celebrate the inventors of penicillin. Like that, it's a bizarre.
Ben, most of your political party doesn't believe in vaccines. Like, that's a weird analogy to make.
Bizarre notion that she is pushing here.
Again, the person that you are trying to put on a pedestal, Ben, is responsible for 90% of indigenous people in North and South America dying.
This is her back in 2019 saying that we should actually kill off Columbus Day in favor of Indigenous Peoples Day. You could even say that you have critiques for Christopher Columbus on Columbus Day. Of course, that's perfectly fine. No one's arguing that.
Okay, but if the critiques are valid and good, Ben, why have Columbus Day?
But to say that instead you want to celebrate the people who were there before, who you would not even have known about, and many of whom were participating in, shall we say, inhumane practices well before Columbus ever discovered the New World.
Ben, Columbus literally trafficked child slaves to the people who worked for him. You're putting a sex slaver of children on a pedestal, Ben. And you're trying to justify it by saying, well, some of those kids belong to cultures where they would do some brutal things. Their cultures really deserved it, though, so it was okay to sex traffic those kids. Thanks, Ben.
That is something else entirely. Here is Kamala Harris back in 2019. Again, this is her preset. Her preset is wild left.
Would you support efforts on a federal level to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, and why does that matter so much?
Sure, yeah. And why it matters is, to your very point, we have to remember history. And this question, I think, really is connected to the last question about our morals and our compass and our goals and our aspirations.
Yeah.
We have to remember.
Why has he started making that fucking noise? It's so weird. I don't want to hear the Ben Shapiro moan.
No, she's going to prosecute the president of the...
Please stop.
Our history. Uncomfortable, to your point about truths.
God, she's so awful. She was so awful in 2019. Fast forward a few years, we were told...
She was so awful because she doesn't want to celebrate a man who like started the transatlantic slave trade. Like like she's so awful because she doesn't want to like celebrate the guy who kicked off a 90% reduction of the indigenous peoples of the Americas.
Told there's a brand new Kamala Harris. Not good. Not good, Bob.
It is an honor, of course, to be with you this week as we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, as we speak truth about our nation's history. Since 1934, every October, the United States has recognized the voyage of the European explorers who first landed on the shores of the Americas. But that is not the whole story. That has never been the whole story. Those explorers ushered in a wave of devastation for tribal nations, perpetrating violence, stealing land, and spreading disease. We must not shy away from this shameful past, and we must shed light on it and do everything we can to address the impact of the past on Native communities today.
And that was Kamala Harris in 2021. So the same as a candidate, same as vice president.
Yeah, but Ben, you can't just say, well, that was her back then. What did she say that you're taking issue with? What was objectionable there? Because what she said there sounded very reasonable. What she said there was like, yeah, we need to be aware of our history. Yeah, we need to be aware of our history, Ben, and maybe not celebrate monsters. Like, it would be pretty weird to have Hitler Day in Germany. That would be pretty weird. And you could argue, well, he introduced most of Europe to the greatness of the Aryan people, or some like weirdly racist argument like that to back it up. But that doesn't mean it's a good argument and that we should have Hitler Day. Like that doesn't track.
And same today. She's not a moderate.
No, Rad Rabbit, here's the thing. There's a difference between a grifter and what Ben Shapiro does. Ben Shapiro's not grifting. Ben Shapiro likely believes all this stuff. But he works for a propaganda outlet that takes billionaire money. And so he's not a grifter in the sense that he's saying things he doesn't believe. He's just a propagandist. And unfortunately, he's a fairly good propagandist.
She was never a moderate. And again, it seems weird to me that the vice president of the United States...
But why, though? Is it willful ignorance? Well, no, Dale. It's because, frankly, he doesn't think indigenous people or their cultures are worthy of respect or are worthy of being considered people. This is the guy who, granted, a while ago, wrote an article saying that all Arabs want to do is bomb shit and live in sewage. So, like, this is a guy who does not think certain groups of people that he considers inferior are actually people. He genuinely, like that is a genuine belief he has to his core, as far as I can tell.
It feels that way about the civilization that has allowed her to be the vice president of the United States. The biggest problem for Kamala Harris is that Kamala Harris exists as a human. That is the biggest problem for her.
Well, Ben, you're getting a little spicy with your rhetoric there, Ben. You're getting awfully close to won't somebody rid me of this troublesome priest.
And there's no way to get around that, which is why she's hiding from the press. Every year when Apple releases the new iPhone, the big carriers play those same old games. Sign your life away for the next few years and get that free iPhone. You don't have to fall for this. With Pure Talk, you can get great...
Oh my God. I forgot the whiplash, guys. The whiplash when he goes into his ad reads, it's unreal. Is Pure Talk like Pure Flix, but for phones?
What is a woman, Mr. Bertram and Runheider mention my name? Stop overpaying to spin her into something. Time magazine, which was desperately attempting to spin her into something amazing. She was on the cover of Time magazine just a couple of months ago as sort of the future. Well, they have an entire 17-minute piece titled, "What Kind of President Would Kamala Harris Be?" There's only one problem. Kamala Harris refused to do the interview. Quote, when she does do interviews, she mostly favors local media, culture podcasts, or friendly talk shows. Harris declined repeated requests for an interview for this story.
Ben, you're saying this right after your candidate backed out of doing a second debate after he agreed to do it because he's not okay in hostile or confrontational interviews or situations.
Contrast,
They make
Trump
him
talked
too
about his
mad.
policy vision with a Time reporter for 90 minutes across 2 interviews. Biden spoke to Time at similar length before dropping out of the race. So I guess their strategy is to basement her. They're going to run the Joe Biden 2020 basement strategy, not in the middle of COVID, and with a person who's supposedly young and virile. That is the case. Listen, even her surrogates can't defend her at this point. Andy Bashir, who was once considered a vice presidential candidate, he was asked, how will Kamala Harris be different from Joe Biden? He can't answer that question because ain't nobody can answer that question. She cannot answer the most simple question in this campaign. Why are you running? Why? Other than just being there, like Chauncey Gardner, why are you running? Okay, and then the second question, how are you different from the guy who's currently there? Those are the 2 key questions of the campaign. She can't answer either of them.
Yeah, and honestly, this is what makes Ben Shapiro good at what he does, unfortunately. Because he's able to layer a lot of shit with like just the right kernel of truth. You know, because like right here, he's right. Kamala Harris has not been able to make a meaningful like proposition of how she's going to be different or better than Biden. And that's a big problem. That's honestly a big problem for her among like the leftist cohort. It's also a problem, but the issue is, and the reason she's running that particular campaign is because she wants to keep the moderates in line. She wants to be seen as more moderate, more even conservative leaning as a Democrat because she wants to shore up the base of the Democratic Party. And that's unfortunately where most of the base is. Most of the base is not where you guys are. Okay? Most of the base is not where, you know, we're wanting like democratic worker co-ops and like housing for all and like, you know, they're not on board with that yet. Mostly because they've never been introduced to the concepts of those things, but also because like they just don't think it's possible. And so people being confused why Harris's numbers are going down are idiots. It's because she creates no energy. She has no policies that the left enjoys. Even Biden went further to the left than she does. And that's the thing, right? Like, I think that what we're seeing is kind of like a miscalculation from her campaign strategists. Because they're trying to play it as safe as possible. And now's the time to like go out there and like, honestly, it doesn't even have to be like the farther left plans that we haven't heard yet. She could be going out there talking all the time about this $6,000 payments she wants to give to like new families. You know, that child tax credit beefed up 2.0. She could be making a huge deal about that. Or she could be talking about more spending on infrastructure and more support for unions. She could be doing all kinds of stuff. She could literally run on like doing a public option, like expanding the negotiations on drug prices even more. But like that, the thrust of the campaign so far doesn't seem to want to focus on specific issues outside of like outflanking conservatives on immigration, or rather the failure of the Donald Trump administration to make a bipartisan deal on immigration, rather. So Harris is supposedly losing votes to Trump because she's not left enough. No.
Card got stolen in Germany, so
Whoa.
resubbed.
Well, Public Loser, thank you for the tier 4 sub. I appreciate that so goddamn much. And Skull Rose, thank you for subscribing, for becoming a member over on YouTube. I appreciate that too. her housing crisis fixes are just a tax cut. She doesn't really have a healthcare plan. She doesn't have a prison plan. She really has nothing other to offer the left. I feel like she was so worried about being branded a leftist, which is dumb because the right brands every candidate a leftist, that she forgot to appeal to the left. Well, the pivot after the convention has been pretty devastating. Honestly, I'm kind of expecting last minute, like last week announcements to try and invigorate like the people who are more plugged in. I'm guessing that's kind of where this is going to go, because it kind of seems to me that her campaign also doesn't want to piss off, establishment Dems who are currently helping her as much as they can, But it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. Now's the time to like put forward a bold vision of what America could be. And instead we're just getting like a kind of a sludgy, unformed mush of what America currently is, with maybe like a hint of cinnamon, So the issue here is that Ben is kind of right here, Like, everything around this moment is dog shit, but for one moment in this video, he's correct.
And neither can any of her surrogates. Here's Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky.
And yet, Dragonfly, I agree with you. I think she will still win, but I think the strategy she is currently adopting is not necessarily great. And I guess for me, as like someone who follows this a lot, my question is how much of my assessment is based on being upset that she's not trying to appeal to me specifically, like I'm not the target audience of her communications, and like I feel awful and everything I see from her and her campaign like sucks recently. But I don't know how. I think I might be fairly out of touch with the median voter she's trying to appeal to. So I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I get what they're going for, but I can't understand looking at all of the options you have available to you and choosing this one.
Do you think she will be different than Joe Biden? What do you think the difference is? She struggled on The View to say anything about anything different, that she would be different.
Well, of course she'll be different, because we are all different individuals. But just look at the
policy-wise.
I mean, they're right there. Right, but President Biden's plans were about building a future economy that is happening right now. We're building the 2 biggest battery plants on planet Earth in Kentucky. We built the cleanest, greenest recycled paper mill the world's ever seen. Those are all through his policies. But hers are about right now. How do we help the American people that are struggling to pay the bills?
Okay, so that is a non-answer. Thanks for that, Andy. And the biggest problem in this race for Kamala Harris is Kamala Harris, but she's always been bad at every job she's ever taken. This is the thing about
what does any of this have to do with Columbus Day, Ben?
Kamala Harris. She keeps failing up. She was originally given a job because she was dating Willie Brown, who was then one of the big political movers and shakers in the state of California, while she was appointed to state-based commissions that paid her a very, very nice salary in the state of California. She never showed up. She didn't go to the meetings. Then, when she became a DA, she tried to challenge her own boss, Terrence Hallinan, for his job. And then when that failed, she moved over to a different segment of the Child Services Unit for the city attorneys. And then she had a performance review, according to Daily Mail over the weekend, and her ratings there stunk as well. On a scale of 1 to 5, Harris only got a 2 on whether she was thorough, helpful, and proactive. And
hey, Ben, did she get a 2 because she wants to get rid of Columbus Day, or was it for completely unrelated reasons? Like, does none of this have anything to do with Columbus Day?
Only a 3 on whether she showed good judgment. She also got a 2 rating for recognizing deadlines, fast turnaround, and anticipating their needs. Apparently, she got a 1 for her failure to return phone calls and emails promptly. Not an amazing performance review, according to the UK Daily Mail. She's never been good. She's been an awful vice president. There's a reason that she was the lowest rated vice president in modern American history.
Hey, Ben, what does a vice president do? What is the vice president's job performance? How is that graded based on their ability as vice president? What are they doing? Is it nothing? Is it basically doing bureaucratic paperwork for the president? Because that's basically what it is, Ben.
No, she's going to prosecute the president of the... Elon Musk.
Oh God, I didn't want to do more. I didn't want that. Anyway, Ben Shapiro seems to have completely lost the plot on Columbus Day, and I want to actually put forward a theory as to why. You see, Ben Shapiro and Columbus Day go way, way back. And very specifically, Ben Shapiro had an animation team at the Daily Wire 6 years ago create a minute-long animated short in honor of Columbus Day that you can no longer find on the Daily Wire's website. And why not? If he wants us to celebrate Columbus Day, clearly we should all watch his lovely cartoon dedication to the holiday. It's going to be full of nuance. It's going to be full of facts, not your feelings. Let's take a look, shall we? The Americas Before Christopher Columbus, circa 1491. The North American indigenous people are a noble people. ... Shouldn't we go back to a more peaceful time? List of contributions, pre-Columbians, 12,000 BC to 1491 AD, dream catchers, tomahawks, and cannibalism. After Columbus, science, medicine, philosophy. Like, I could go through and indicate how each one of these points is absolutely bullshit. But I feel like I don't have to, considering that this is literally on par with, like, Nazi propaganda telling children that Jews live upside down and feed on their blood. Like, this is like a level of racism that's honestly so beyond the pale that the Daily Wire had to delete it, and ever since have been pretending that it was never authorized, or that it was some secret project that some crazy intern cooked up, somehow leaked on the internet. But, you know, I just have to let you guys know, animation doesn't really work that way. It takes time to animate something, even something of this quality. And Ben Shapiro definitely knew about it. He's got a huge boner for Columbus Day. He knew about this, and in my mind, I believe he endorsed this. I think he gave this the green light, and that is why this is never talked about by him ever again. Yep. That's right. It was an official Daily Wire production. They slapped this on the end of it. It is honestly baffling to me the boner conservatives have for this holiday and that man. And honestly, I think the most obvious explanation is that they just approve of the mass slaughter of indigenous people. They just think it was good. And like every part of what they depict in their propaganda when they talk about it is that it was a good thing that 90% of the indigenous population died. That millions upon millions upon millions of people died. And obviously that cannot be true. It is absolutely not true that it was good that that happened. Like, if you recognize the tragedy of the Holocaust, you should be able to recognize the tragedy of an event like 10 times that size. And it is truly monstrous to me that the Daily Wire to this day continues to defend Christopher Columbus on the basis of, well, you know, he introduced Western civilization. It's just racism. It is just a racist justification for genocide. Full stop. Happy Indigenous peoples.